Welcome, sales professionals, those aspiring to be, and maybe you're a sales associate looking to up your skill level. And of course, those peak performance professionals that are got a foot in each camp. You might be joining us at Real Estate Rock and Roller every week for high level or more advanced training, but there is nothing wrong with looking back at the rudimentary skills that sit inside those of the disposition, of course, of traction. Been an interesting week. We've had lots going on, and I will take you around the traps ever so briefly. But important, if we just look at last week when we spoke here mainly about platforming, and that of course is making sure that everything's consistent with all of the products you're putting out there. And we put all of our energy and focus into the Property Sellers Research Guide. We are seeing some remarkable stuff coming from this. You know, I said last week, stay away from the ideal of pushing too hard for a presentation. If you do that, you're most invariably going to find yourself degenerating into a point where you're probably offering concessions mainly through desperation. I understand that getting hold of new and incoming listings is tight at the moment, and this has all been brought about by the fact that many sellers have got the I guess unnatural disposition of having lockdown in play on the back of COVID-19. But what I can tell you is there's just been some extraordinary stuff coming out of the results factor. I might have alluded to this last week, but I have a friend that's a property on the Gold Coast up there in Queensland, and of course they don't have the same restrictions there, but invariably, there is still supply is exceeding demand, and that property came on. They were talking, I guess, in the order of or up to and knocking on the door of $1 million. Well, I can tell you now that property, they had 9 buyers in the first week, something like about 13 last weekend again, and the property looks like it's now going to be sold at about $1.3 million, just over there marginally. You know that I'm a big proponent of odd amounts, anyone that's talked to me. So this is the sort of thing that's happening. And the important thing with that, and I will delve into this as we progress, was that the marketing around that particular property was such that we were able to, and I've said this, the quickest way to sell someone something is tell them that you don't want it. And it wasn't so much that the property's value, if you ran it comparatively, came anywhere near the 1.3. The thing that got it across the line was the perception, coupled with the agent's ability to move into a space where they extended the buyers, and in particular this buyer, to the point, to the realms or the edges of their financial capacity. So it was that this owner fell for the property, wanted it, and their budget was such that they could be extended to that level. So the funds were available. And of course, through negotiation prowess, we were able to successfully get that buyer to that point. So this needs to be understood. Now, the big thing when we're talking about platforming is in your prospecting endeavors, if you are empathetic with what's going on with property sellers at the moment, especially those states where lockdowns conditions still prevail. There are still restrictions in Queensland, of course, in and around COVID, and the supply and demand feature is in play. But the best way to actually run your prospecting at the moment is by forging a relationship. Now, we said this very, very clearly in all of our discussions last week, where we basically said, look, the future arrives. So at the moment, don't be pushing too hard. You don't want to get to the point where you're kind of belligerent, or you're annoying people, or you're just pushing them away because you're pushing too hard for the things that you want. And this is a relevant subject or relevant topic matter, especially as I get to promotion how you put that in place, and how it's actually being explained in the right manner across the line when we're talking to sellers about the marketing of their properties. So this week with Property Careers with our sales associates, so some of you may well have sales associates working in and around your team, and they're pushing leads, pushing active property sellers and locating those active property sellers and pushing across. And the big thing we talked about the week before this was the orientation of your prospecting, and that orientation needs to be that, just again recapping, once you qualify that particular buyer to also be a property seller and hopefully in your area, that you then move or you make the conversation centric to their motive. And in pushing that centric motive, the orientation needs to be, where are you coming from? Were you looking at this property or inquiring in this property? If it's someone that's come to a welcome home, or if they've come via inquiry, were you looking at this in the context of comparison to your own, and then expanding on that. So where are you coming from? Where are you looking at going to? How soon do you need to be there? And then this week we started to talk about, having made that orientation around the motive, how do we then move into the space of creating a connection, a real connection where they start to lean on you in terms of your professional capacity, so much so that when the time comes and they're moving toward a listing presentation, that you receive an invitation down rather than putting all of your energy into the solicitation of a presentation, which I've got to say, quite often when you push too hard on the solicitation side, and particularly when there's resistance from the seller, that basically that presentation then becomes a market appraisal. And I can tell you there's no money in market appraisals. Then we start to make the premise of the relationship subject to price or about price, rather than it being about the motive. And this is where the whole thing starts to degenerate. And before you know it, you're then being subject to maybe fee discounts or concessions in marketing, which again creates a problem. So we talked about the motive, and we explained to the sales associates, those that are aspiring to break a market, get a foothold, and understand how they make connections with active property sellers in prospecting. We started to talk to them about the motive and how we gave rise to definition in and around that motive. The fact that the motive is made up of understanding what or why they're trying to go and do, but this only reveals the superficial motive. And then we start to delve down in layers, pushing back by, going through those layers by asking why it is that you want to do that, and trying to get a better understanding as we move down, understanding why they want to do it, and then getting to the final component, which of course is, when does that need to be done? Once you've made that emotional connection, and in making that emotional connection, understanding that when we're trying to get or delve down deeper into the motive, it's not an interrogation, it is actually a search. So you've got to keep your conversation in building rapport. And even though we talk about this in preparation when you get to the listing presentation, in determining your client style, which is something that we will be talking on here about in the coming weeks, but we then start to put all of our energy into building rapport. Now, I say that this can be done early on, particularly now, in making a connection with prospects, because we're looking to promote that relationship where they become reliant on your professional capacity, and indeed move to inviting you down to give them some advice, which of course is about a listing education. And this brings me to, which I'll get on to a second, and that's the really big contrast that we're focusing upon now. In fact, this morning, bright and early, 9 o'clock New Zealand time, we are right in the realms in our second week of discussing training around a listing education that'll go for about 14 weeks. Those of you that are in the Sales Trainer Mentor program that would like to join in on that, you're most welcome to do so. Notwithstanding the fact that, as I said last week, we're going to begin that very same training over here on the East Coast of Australia. And then eventually, hopefully, once we get the numbers up, we probably will do the same for Perth. So you can actually operate around times that are more suitable. But that is more in-depth training around the presentation. And we're going to take it everything from go to woe, which I'll expand on in just a moment. So again, with our sales associates and our training at Prospector School, we said that, you know, to build the rapport, make sure that when you are on the phone, having these follow-up calls and discussing their motive, that, you know, you keep the conversation centric to those very 3 subjects that do build rapport. Now, I've already talked about the motive, and you keep the conversation on that centric. Yeah, very simply, where are you coming from? Where are you going to? Then why would you want to do that, and when might that be by? The second subject matter that you need to push the context of all discussions to are those around the property itself, whether there have been improvements, what they've done to it, what caused them to buy it early on. I did put a caveat on this. I know that some companies are very big on creating communication, or even creating some sort of correspondence that they send out to sellers. And some of them years ago called it seller's homework, where they said, you know, tell me what it is, or note down all the features that you found interesting about this property and why you wanted to make it your home early on. Sounds pretty good in application, sounds like a great idea, and it actually causes some engagement and some involvement. But I would refrain from giving active property sellers in the early stages, certainly before you get to the point of running a listing education and or presentation, homework. This is just insane. Remember, do not lose sight of the fact that before your professional services, you are going to be asking these people to pay you a commission for your services. Yes, it is consignment selling, and yes, you earn it. But, you know, it's in the tens of thousands of dollars these days. To then be giving people, property sellers, a job to do is just insane. The end goal is for them to glean enough confidence in you to leave all the work up to you, not for you to be giving them work to do. So I'd stay right away from it. This doesn't mean that you can't be asking these questions. It doesn't mean that it's not good subject matter to be talking back and forth. So if you're talking about the property, you can ask these questions, you make the notes, you put the details down, but don't be sending them homework out. I think that's nuts. You can disagree with me if you like, but I'm feeling a bit cheeky this morning because I got up pretty early. Just remember 12 to 15 listings each and every month, 10 sales a month. You don't do that by giving people homework. You do that by creating enough confidence in your professional capacity for them to say, or look at you and say, can I just leave everything to you? And you say, yeah, I welcome that idea. So then keep that conversation, is what we were saying to our sales associates, to say the same thing to you as sales professionals. Make sure the context of the conversation is around the motive. We've already covered that, the property, and then finally the client. Just avoid, do not fall for the trap of believing that if they start to talk to you about you, yourself, your interests and everything that you do, that having similar interests or similar platforms creates good rapport. Not true. People want to talk about themselves. They won't articulate it this way, but if you drive the conversation and encourage them to talk mostly about themselves, and you spend the vast majority of your time listening and understanding what they have to say about themselves, this is what will forge the path to building the right rapport status. Anyway, finally, what we then spoke to those sales associates about is passive communication. We said, look, you need to be very, very careful to tamper the amount of communication with your active property seller list. You need to be the judge of that, but I'm thinking that once a week is probably the optimum level. You might want to be stretching that to once, every 10 days to as long as maybe every 2 weeks, where you have the verbal communication. We're not looking to get rid of that. Just be mindful of the fact that anything more than every week, or anything more than even in some cases a fortnight, might just be too much, and you are running the risk of badgering them, of becoming a little bit of a pain in the backside, so much so that they might say, look, we've changed our mind, or we're just shelving it at the meantime. Now you're in that awful disposition of not being able to call them, because that would be being ignorant and disobeying their request, but also running the risk that they are still talking to other agents who have tampered that amount. And the next you know of it, there's another agent sign on there. You call them up. They say, well, we thought you'd lost interest. You're like, you guys told me not to call. So you just don't want to get to that point. So what I say is that you have to build in, and I know that I've mentioned this before, lots of passive connections, lots of positive response that is conducive to creating the right platform for further engagement in and around subject matter that pertains to those three subject matters: their motive, the property, and the client. And this can be readily promoted by sending that information out. So we just gave this in order, and you might want to make some quick notes on this if you are a sales professional, and at least if you've got a sales associate working with you, you can oversee it. So we send out the property sellers research guide. If you don't have a property sellers research guide, you can readily use any form of a pre-listing kit that you might have. If you want a property sellers research guide, well, I say to you very openly, get in contact with us. We can actually help you develop that. I can give you some sort of format to run with it. If you decide to use us, yes, there is an investment associated with that. If you don't want to make that investment, that's fine. Can you copy ours word for word? No, you cannot, because I created that, and that is utilized for people to do it, but I can give you the context of it, and you can go ahead and put something together. So the property sellers research guide, I believe that's something you should go out almost straight away. Even a pre-listing kit is the moment you've identified someone as being active. You know, they may not be doing anything today, this week, or even next week, but you know that it is imminent that they are likely to come to the market. The next thing you want to do is put them onto your SMS router list, so that at least twice a week you are texting sales results as they come to hand. Again, those of you that are involved with the Sales Trainer Mentor program, we've got all those texts and they're preordained for you. You just simply go onto listandsell.com.au, find your way down in the Sales Trainer drop down, go into the library, look at aids, and then inside of aids, you'll see SMS texting your results. And you do this no more than twice a week. So I say, don't let any messages go out more or closer than 72 hours apart. And this is enough to actually keep them informed, and they can see your activity as it plays out and showing results in real time. The next one, and this was the real big one, is we say that you should put together a comparative market analysis and send it out now. Now, this needs to be devoid of your opinion of price. It does need to go with a cover letter that echoes the sentiments that are contained inside the property sellers research guide, where we make it clear that comparative value is just a benchmark. It's a subjective opinion, that their opinion is going to largely differ from that of the buyers. It may even conflict or differ with the opinion of you as a sales professional, but it matters very little, because what they receive for the property when they eventually put it on the market is market value, and market value can be above or below comparative value, but is typically enhanced via sales professionalism, and those three things: marketing, negotiation, and communication. And we'll come back to that. But send this out now, send this out early, and now you've got a platform that is most likely going to promote good, solid engagement when you are communicating with them verbally. And of course, all of this passive contact going out is almost the same as you calling them up, but without that badgering thing where they feel like you're ringing them or contacting them too much and maybe seeming a little desperate. Next thing that you send out is your newsletter, or what we could refer to as the market roundup. That needs to go out on the same day every month. You know, it's one where they may or may not open it. Make sure it's clean, neat, and quite lean, and it has just three things in it. In less than 100 words, tells them how the market is, goes on to then pretty much show them some recent sales. You need to have about 15. If you have to stretch back over the last 12 or 13 weeks or so, that's okay too. Has a gleaning of sales and has lots of representation around success and accolades and or recommendations from past or previous clients, which leads me to my next point. You also need to be building up your accolades and feeding these back into the real estate market. With those that we're working with in Sales Trainer Mentor, bringing these accolades up to date. And at the moment, I must admit that we've put a lot of energy into this, and that was the subject matter for our real estate rock stars this week, when we talked to them about building their accolades and feeding them back. So we're getting them to now start to put these accolades into margin ads or advertisements on social media. So people click on it, they can see people talking about the fact that they've just sold their property. Now, of course, these are tied in with analytics. So if people are jumping onto social media platforms and mentioning real estate, then specific to that area, those little accolades will pop up. There'll be a wrap. And ways we know that if your client says something of you rather than you saying it about you, client says it of you, it's totally believed. You say it of yourself, then it's doubted. So this is quite powerful. We're also getting into those accolades or pushing the 2View platform. So we're pushing this up, and we're more or less promoting properties, which is driving inquiries straight back, but putting the 2View, which is an individual property website for each property, and then pushing those into margin ads and explaining that if you list your property with your particular company, then you get the 2View website. And this, of course, is bringing in more active property sellers that are jumping on top of those. Then the next big one is providing case studies. And I think this is critical in this environment at the moment, especially where those states you've got lockdown and the like, and there is some reluctance to move forward with getting the property on the market until either the restrictions are lifted, or, as many sellers are saying, until I can find something to buy, I'm just not willing to entertain the notion of getting a property onto market. So if you can provide some case studies where people heeded your advice, did get their property on, then knew where they stood, and, for example, had greater buying power because they got a buyer first and were able to buy a better property, or that they were comfortably able to coordinate the two. I had one where I explained that, I know that Sean Donovan is on here now. He was telling me that the one where I said, like, have you ever gone window shopping? And when you're window shopping, you can't seem to find what you want, or it's a bit boring and it's a bit mundane. But when you do go out to buy and you got money in your pocket, you always manage to find what you want and come home with a purchase. They said, yeah. So, well, it's the same thing. If you get yours on the market and we get to the stage where you have a buyer and you know where you stand with that buyer, even though you've been struggling, now you go out as a buyer and knowing that you can perform and what level you can perform to, miraculously, you're going to find something. And of course, in the unlikely event that you don't, there's nothing that says that you have to sell, because listing is not selling. I know I'm echoing a lot of the sentiments that I've talked about in previous weeks, but I think it's important that you do understand that and that we get this on board, because it is basically your orientation and making the connection. Because I keep saying this, the future arrives, and as the fog lifts, we will see loads of instances where sellers will then be very much receptive to the idea of getting their property listed and onto the market. It's those agents that have made the connection, that have focused on the motive, and have had the right relationship around their professional capacity, that will list these properties and successfully be able to move them. And then, by last but not least, that we make sure that we get information around specific buyers that we have for their property, thereby diffusing any chance of maybe someone getting under your guard and getting a property onto the market on the premise of the off-market arrangement. And again, I'm not saying you can do it on off-market as well, just making them aware that this can be done quite successfully. And we've had some extraordinary examples of this where we started a counter. I know that Justin Hicks, and he up in Brisbane, this week we got one property up and away, got it through with all the stuff that we're talking about here, had 110 buyers to this property. And it's in a segment in the market in the medium density where there has been resistance, but ended up getting a price that was some sort of 30% greater than they anticipated, feeding this information again back in to that medium density market and getting more listings coming on board as a result. Again, another fantastic result and working perfectly to the advantage of everyone involved. We also spoke with the real estate rock stars about planning. I urge you all to understand this. Do not go into next month. What are we now? Toward the end of the month, we've got about a week to go. Ensure that as you move forward next week, if you're not in an office where regular planning meetings are held, you need to hold your own mini planning meeting and sit down and set a goal for yourself. Do not be sitting there saying, I'll list as many as I can get. I'll do my best. Those people are always, it's like I say, the best thing about being mediocre is you're at your best every day. Extend yourself. Make sure that you have a goal that is mandatory and conservative by nature. I tie that listings goal and that sales goal to the previous year's performance. I'm happy if you keep it at the same level or maybe increase it. But even if you do increase it, make sure it's only by 1 at the very most, because goals, because of their nature of being mandatory to achieve, need to be conservative by nature. However, a target, because that's aspirational, you can take aim at a target, shoot at it, narrowly miss and get close, and everyone goes, that's really great. So for that reason, they can be largely aspirational, and you can tie those to your best month ever. But please, please indulge me on this one. Do not go into next month without having a clear understanding of exactly what number of properties you want to list. Work back from there on your ratios, knowing exactly how many listing presentations, aka listing educations, that you have to do in order to achieve that. Work that back to how many active property sellers you have to come across. So for example, I sat with 2 of our guys down in Victoria yesterday, and they've successfully sold during the draconian measures and restrictions of lockdown, listed and sold 3 properties. Now that the restrictions are lifted, they've got listings that we were able to secure during lockdown that are now come on with marketing. One that had some phenomenal number of, again, buyers through it. And we had 9 bona fide buyers last week. That's now been done. Another one that comes to market this week. And we're leveraging off this successfully, as is the mantra of traction in and around your professional building market share. So again, re-engaged and focused on LA Woman, which is the just listed, getting that out before the for sale sign goes up. We're very much focused on, these sales that are taking place. One, which is no open for inspection or no inspections that has been promoted as such, coming up this weekend. But just here's another tip. We sent out, even though you can't hold the open for inspections per se, we've had the property advertisers open with a 4-hour window on the weekend and still got the welcome home invitation out, not with a specific time format, but with the invitation for any prospective seller researching the market to call, and we would get them through whilst we had other buyers there for them to run a comparison with their own. This, of course, is creating a connection with more active property sellers, thereby then giving them, as we just talked about, the case studies and all that sort of stuff, and it's promoting great leverage. So there's one that we've got sold down there. This is the team that I'm working with. This is Ange Shiralis and indeed Stuart Hatfield. And we've actually prepared the Telegram Sam and the Telegram Sam and the Celegram, and both of which have been delivered out before the sold sticker goes up. So we cleared it with the owner. We just want to get our promo because we come out of lockdown. We just want to create some quick connections with some more sellers because we've got more buyers here that we're trying to find properties for, and they know that the sold sticker is not going to go up, creating that promotion, creating that interest, and the cycle continues. So please be mindful of that. All right, just want to get on to today's subject matter as we talk about. So today I want to talk about promotion. All of this and the remaining, these last few weeks and all of next month, we're going to be focusing very, very heavily on the listing, shall I say it, listing education. I wish it wasn't called a presentation. I think the major form of engagement is that you should be teaching sellers how to go about the number one, the selection of agents, that agents should be selected on their professional capacity, their propensity as a marketer, their propensity as a negotiator, and that, of course, as a good communicator. This is all evident inside the Property Sellers Research Guide. And because it's been such a big subject, as I just said, that, you know, we've got listing presentation specific and extended training going on down there, or over there, I'm sorry, in NZ, and we're doing this every week in Australian Eastern Standard Time at 7 a.m. through to 9 a.m. You know, and the huge push on this has been getting sellers to understand and getting them to not only, you know, because what actually happens, especially with this off-market phenomenon, there's a lot of agents out there, and this is the difference that I just want to point out, that are now talking about off-market. And let's face it, a lot of sellers are going for this because there is a reluctance for them to invest in marketing. And they think that feel like they're saving some money, which I just think is completely ludicrous. There are benefits to the advertising and promotion of property. I get that, but that is not what I'm talking about. I can tell you by with that listing that I just referred to earlier on, by not actually marketing that property, or if we didn't market that property, I'm absolutely certain, not maybe, absolutely certain, that instead of getting from a value, a comparative value of just around or just over $1 million, instead getting to 1.3, that is a shitload of money on top of $1 million, like 30% more. The reason that we got there is because of the marketing. Now, this is not advertising. I've got to say this, you need to be able to competently explain the difference between advertising and marketing. One of the great misconceptions of real estate sales is that when we say the word marketing, automatically the property seller thinks advertising. This is their perspective. And then when they think advertising, they then inadvertently think, bang, a cost. They think this is where I'm handing money over. Now, we need to be able to explain the difference between the two. I want to make this point very, very clear to all that are listening right now. Advertising is a component of marketing. It is definitely not marketing per se. All that advertising is, if I was to use a single word, is promotion, and it's the act of promotion. Yeah, nothing more, nothing less. It's just the act of promotion. So all that advertising is a conduit by which you get the message out. And here's the most important thing. If we're to talk about the currency of advertising, it is not much more than a conduit. So the currency of advertising, when all is said and done, anyone can get hold of a large conduit. The more you want to amplify a message, the bigger the conduit you need. So in advertising, its currency is not much more than money. Now, I've got to share this with you. Spending money does not require intelligence. advertising does not require intelligence. There is nothing intelligent about advertising. It is also a nonsense ideal to believe that advertising, bringing people in, increases the likelihood, first of all, of selling it, or even the notion of improving its price. You see, because yes, that gets the word out, but if the message contained in the ad is inferior, or is, for want of a better way of saying it, shit, then you're just amplifying the number of people that know that it's shit. Please understand that marketing is not much more than the conduit by which you get the message out. Marketing is the message contained within. And so it is that the currency of advertising is dollars and cents. And I've already said that that doesn't take much intelligence. Yet the currency of marketing is imagination. It's how you control that message. It's the perception that you create. And where this seems to have been lost, especially with this off-market ideal. Now, I keep saying this, and look, let's bring it all the way back. Let's have a look at how we, before everyone gets, yeah, I get that. And I know some of you that have been spending some time, you might be on here and you've heard me talk about this for years. Oh, he's not going to rabbit on about that stuff. You need to tighten up your understanding around this. Too many agents do not understand the danger that they are putting their sellers under by not making them aware of the fact that they could literally be running the risk of devaluing their property by not investing in the perception of it out in the marketplace. And I think this is actually even worse. I think where it gets bad is like, because what sellers do is they hear the word marketing. This is their perspective. They correlate that with advertising. They think advertising. They correlate that with an expense. They correlate that with fees and charges. So they look at the whole thing as an expense. And this is when you come in and you say off market, they go, oh, this is my chance not to actually have to pay something. And what I say to them openly is, hang on, I understand that this is not a few dollars. It's a fair whack of money. So a couple of thousand, can be up to 5,000, whatever. But in the context of the property you're selling, it can translate to tens of thousands of dollars more, both positively and negatively. They go, what do you mean? I say, well, you think that's a big expense, but if I explain to you that small amount, which is not what you receive, the one that you're going to get back is the big amount, if that's greatly enhanced by $10, $20, or $30,000, how does it look now? Fairly insignificant. Conversely, if you fail to convey the right perception of your property in the marketplace, when we put this to market, the amount of money you receive back can be decreased by $10,000 or $20,000. So what I guess I'm getting at is if you get $10,000 or $20,000 less than what you could have got, whereas if you'd done it, you could have got $10,000 or $20,000 more, that could end up being a significant amount of money that you're missing out on because a professional has failed to explain the virtues of creating an enhanced perception in and around the property. The idea of advertising just to get buyers, I must tell you this, Mr. Seller. I concede that finding a buyer for your property is the easy part. The question will always be out as to whether we found the ideal buyer to make the entire situation work to your advantage. So I understand for you as agents that there is a reluctance, and I think this reluctance is born out of the fact that we look at it as advertising, we look at it as passing an expense on. I believe that it's been a derivative of this vulgar acronym of VPA, vendor paid advertising. Believe you me, if sellers knew that we held seminars, that we held training sessions, not me, but where other agents did, and they said, what you've got to do is recoup or get sellers to pay money for ads so that we don't have to pay for them. And one of the benefits of us getting that is it not only keeps the expenses down, but greatly enhances us out there in the marketplace. So I think that what agents do is we look at marketing and we go, it's VPA. It creates exposure, which creates a profile. That profile creates presence, and that presence creates prospects. Now, I'm going to agree with that. Yeah, that's a great byproduct. But you can create presence way more economically than finding yourself in this position where you're just selling advertising space that doesn't have per se an absolute benefit for property sellers, thereby creating a stumbling block. I mean, one of my pet hates is the likes of these online portals, whether it be realestate.com or whether it be Trade Me in NZ. You guys are out there all the time, forced into this arrangement where you are selling their space and putting up with all the objections and all the apprehensions, even to the point where they might not list with you because you're trying to sell this third-party product and there's no benefit. They don't pay us. They don't look after us. They don't do anything for us. So it's time to dispel the myth. The reality is advertising per se does not sell real estate. You don't need a bigger ad. I've said this all the way along. You can get a good listing and you can take a photograph of it with your iPhone. You can then go and stick that photograph with chewing gum to the inside of your real estate window, write the price on it with a texter, and the buyers will still come. Now, the jury will always be out that when they get there, if their perception is not enhanced, whether or not you could have gotten more value for the property. Just understand that the muscle is in the marketing, not inside the ad. And we need to start thinking in this context and presenting it the right way. I'm not saying that if you get a whole lot of buyers for a property, that competition doesn't improve pricing, but what are you going to do in the absence of competition? And in any case, we want to get the optimum buyer, not just a whole run of buyers. For more information on this, I openly encourage you to get in touch, get involved in building your skills around a listing education, get into some more protracted training with us as we unveil this over October and through the early part of November, and make sure that you go into the lift around the lockdown restrictions and all that sort of stuff with a listing education that will have you listing any property you want to get hold of. My name's Mark Dwyer. You can reach me at Mark with a K at salestrainer.com.au, or you can telephone me at +61 410 592 165. And I look forward to catching up with you next week when we start to talk about being thoroughly prepared at a listing presentation, turning up to that presentation, having gathered all the intelligence that gives you a decided advantage over any other agent you may be up against.